You're listening to Scribble Talk, a podcast for bid and proposal professionals. My name is Bhaskar Sundram, and with my co-host,
Ashley Case.
We will be sitting down with our industry veterans to share their stories, discuss their career, and learn how to make an impact in the industry.
Today's guest is David Warley. David, CPP APMP Fellow, is founder of Win Ltd. After 16 years of experience in telecommunications and IT, David's first bid was in 1986. After 8 more years climbing the greasy pole of corporate employment, David struck out as an independent consultant. His specialism was the implementation of global networks, and he has led several major bids in IT infrastructure projects. In 2006, he became one of the first APMP Certified Professionals and approved trainers. In 2007, he founded Win Ltd. And has provided certification training in UK, Europe, India, and the US. He has been a frequent presenter at APMP UK and International conferences. His focus has been on helping organizations improve their capability and maturity and on promoting good practice from the world of project management. He is a volunteer in the APM Contracts and Procurement Specific Interest Group, where he continues to pursue his interest, making sure that projects do what they promise and users get the benefits that taxpayers and/or shareholders paid for. Welcome, David, to Scribble Talk. Great to have you with us.
Thank you, Ashley. Glad to be here.
So David, if you've listened to our podcast before, you know we love to start in the beginning. So we're curious, where were you born? Where did you grow up? Where did you go to school?
I was born in North Yorkshire in probably the first sea bathing holiday resort in the UK, which is Scarborough, where sea bathing became popular in the late 18th century. It's still a holiday resort, but now that people can get on a jet plane and go somewhere where it's warmer, it's not quite as frequented as it used to be. It was interesting growing up in a holiday resort because we used to meet frequent visitors, and like most people in town, my mother would, during the summer, take in visitors, so I would meet a lot of people. That's where I went to school. It was the local grammar school, which we had in those days. Some London boroughs still do. And then on to Newcastle University, where I indulged my passion for politics and didn't really do much on my degree.
Interesting. So was your first job out of school related to your degree, related to politics, or something completely different?
It was totally different because I was fortunate to get a summer assignment working in the laboratory of the chemistry department where I was studying for my degree. And I concluded in that summer that chemistry was not for me. One would end up learning more and more about less and less and becoming increasingly specialized until one knew everything there was to know about hardly anything at all. So I took the first non-chemistry related job that was offered. By the way, I did have a year as sabbatical leave, being a student officer as president of the union. So that my first paid job was totally non-chemistry related. And so I always enjoyed sitting on the council and senate of the university and representing the student body and managing certain welfare facilities and other things that were there. So my first job was with British Telecommunications, which was then, I'm very, very old, actually, I should add. So in those days, it was Post Office Telecommunications. And so my name went into the big drum and I was assigned to my first duty. I said, report to 2 to 12 Gresham Street. Now, working for Post Office Data Processing Services, as it then was, I could have ended up being payroll processing, but by an incredible piece of luck, I was sent to Gresham Street, which was the scientific computing unit. And there we had a lot of time-sharing computers that supported all the research workers at Dollis Hill and Martlesham Heath, where the British Telecom, as it was to become, was working on advanced technologies like packet switching and view data And these people were my customers, and I was there to help them support in their use of computing to design and develop these new services, which was a terrific start for me, because I fell in love with computing for the first 7 years. So
Yeah.
my job
Wow.
was what you would now call tech support. So I used to tweak the operating systems on these mainframes and bend them and fix them when they broke, and we had to adapt them. So which was a very interesting job. Sure.
Yeah, very interesting. Can you tell us a little bit about how those computers that you first worked on are different from those computers that we're working on today?
My first computer was a Burroughs B5500. It lived in a room about 4 times bigger than the room I'm talking from you now. It's my office, so it took up at least 4 times the space of my office. It had to be air conditioned. You could walk around it and open the doors on it, and it had the ability to support about 30 to 100 time-sharing users, which sounds a lot, but when you consider that it was less powerful than my mobile phone today. So,
yeah, that's fascinating.
It was specifically designed to support a language called Algol, which some people may have heard of, but that was designed around this. And so the whole beauty of the concept and how the machine was designed to implement the high-level language just took me on board. So I used to admire the design of the order code and how these things like stacks had all been implemented. It made a lot of the stuff that IBM and its other competitors were doing, look very old hat when I moved on to supporting those later. So.
Wow, very cool. So eventually you started working on bids. I understand your first bid was in 1986.
Yeah, that was like your intro said. I'd spent 16 years going through this IT support hierarchy, and I have a 7-year itch. If things stops being fun, you move on. So I'd already moved on to standard telephones and cables, and I'd supported their IT there. And then I moved into a small software house which they owned, and was doing sort of pre-sale support when a colleague approached me in the corridor and said, would you like to manage this bid that we're doing with Information Terminals Division from Standard Telephones? I said, what do you mean manage a bid? He said, you go along to meetings, you take the minutes and follow up the actions. It will all be over by Christmas. This was October. And 18 months later and over £500,000 later, we got the silver medal, which was predictable, bearing in mind that we didn't know the customer. It was a derelict account and we'd never worked in this area before, but it was an incredibly bumpy and very exciting ride. It involved putting together a consortium of terminal suppliers, working with fault-tolerant computer suppliers, bringing on board a packet switch network vendor, and then bidding for all of the systems integration and making all of that work. It was a large value bid. In those days, the host company, which we then were, was ICL. That in turn was owned by Fujitsu. So everything had to be signed off at in Nagoya. And actually on the first day that I was on the ICL payroll, I was in the office with Peter Bonfield, Sir Peter, as he was later to become, as we reviewed the case for this bid.
Oh, wow.
I was in no way qualified to do any of all this stuff, but folks seem to think that I was making a good job of it. But yeah, I was learning. It was 18 hours a day, continuously, 6 days a week, juggling all these different plates, putting things together, finding out what capabilities there were within the organization. Oh, and incidentally, we had to write a proposal as well as do all the estimating. But, in those days, we didn't have PCs. They had not been heard of. All the proposal work was written out by hand and sent down to the typing pool.
Yeah, wow.
We produced a metric for that bid, which was there were 2 million key depressions used in producing the proposal.
Oh, wow.
We were fortunate that we had a studio next door to the typing pool where we could put the graphics together. So we were able to do half decent illustrations as well. So one of those things is that we really need to get better at this. We didn't know, we shouldn't have bid for this. We spent a lot of money, but experience keeps an expensive school. I learned a lot. I said, look, we just need to get better at this. And they asked me to go and work on other bids and later to set up the pre-sales support department for the business unit I was in.
Oh my goodness, wow. So your first one and you were hooked. You were too good at it.
I'm not saying I was good at it because I'm a results merchant. We're in it to win, and I really hate losing because losing sucks. And,
yeah.
I just hate losing. But for me, bid management was a step on because one of the things I learned, I mean, I was looking at all the risk management, the governance processes, the estimation. We went through a process of being audited by one of the big 5 consultancies because the customer was concerned about our ability to estimate the effort. So I survived a STEM audit and came out of that with flying colours, we're told. Software tender evaluation method, which was... So I learned all of that. What I really learned is you really need to understand your customer and get close to your customer. Although we didn't win, the customer took us out to dinner. Now, I've never known customers do this, but customers took us to dinner to say thank you for the effort that we had put in.
Wow.
That's the best. Well, it was the wrong debrief, but no one's ever taken me to lunch to say thank you, you lost, but have lunch on us. And we went to a nice restaurant in somewhere in the city. So that was a bid to the post office, my old employer, for their counters automation business. So.
Oh, wow. If you're going to lose, that's the way to do it, right?
But you must learn. You must
yes.
learn.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, we just have to get better. So after that, I set up the pre-sales unit and I found out what ICL Defence had been doing in bid management, and I completely and shamelessly ripped off their process manual and reissued it as the Hitchhiker's Guide to Bid Management, which became the handbook that was applied for all bids in the network systems division, which is where I was working then.
Wow, that's amazing.
And then, having done that, they offered me a job in general management because we had bought a unit and said, you seem to be okay at this, so let's go a next step up. And here's a line management job for you. So I became general manager of the DPN business unit, where DPN was a line of switching products from Northern Telecom, which is a company we were related with, and I run their UK operation. So it took me out of bid management, but obviously to win business, I had to bring those skills to bear.
Absolutely.
So for me, getting into bid management was kind of a step up the ladder, because I think a bid manager has this helicopter view of everything, the solution, the costs, the price, the strategy. He knows the customer. So there are not many people in that who have that overall view. Subject matter experts know the technology. The accountants know the money. The program manager may know the time, the costs, but the bid manager has that overall view.
Right, it's so true. So eventually, you left working for a company and started an entrepreneurial journey with Bid to Win. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Oh, no, Bid to Win came a little after that because I left ICL when I could see that the business it was in was not going. This was the internet didn't exist when I started work, by the way. So we were, so in the world of everything, where everything started with X25, X400, we were selling X400 packet switches, and I realized that there wasn't a market for these, that this thing called the internet was suddenly we'd be able to get email for free when we take out a subscription. So I moved to a small company on the way down, had a little bounce, worked in a small operation selling telex packet switches. And then in 1995, I went fully independent and I learned the value of my network. I said, look, I'm a telecoms consultant. I can advise clients on how to put together networks and build things and how to manage initiatives. So I went to see an old friend who I'd worked with at ICL, at BT. So Peter, give us a job. And since those days, 1995, I've been Mr. Daily Paid. So I had a couple of projects with Peter, building global networks, European networks. And then in 2006, a contact at Nokia, which was merging with Siemens, asked me to put together the rollout of their bid management education program. I think you met this gentleman. It was Wolfram Syring.
Yeah.
You've done. And so I thought we really ought to have a vehicle for doing this. So I started Bid to Win, which was essentially a training company. We developed a custom program, and working with global companies like Nokia and Siemens, you can end up in some very interesting places.
Yeah.
I've done 5 or 6 2-day workshops in Rio de Janeiro, which is probably the most glamorous place I've ever trained in.
Yeah.
And I've been on all 6 continents. I haven't been to Antarctica because not many people got a business operation there. So,
True.
We built the business, which was me plus a few trusted associates to roll out this training program. And obviously, when suggested the benefits of certification or accreditation, it was then called, Wolfram decided he would like his team, or certainly those in his European and later his Indian operation, to become accredited with the APMP. So having already set up one ATO for another consultancy, I did it again and Bid to Win became an ATO, and we ran out accreditation in Nokia Siemens. So I have one of my favorite photos is a class I run in Noida near Delhi. 24 graduates in the Indian class in the new proposal center, support center that they set up there. So.
Oh, that's amazing. So just going from your Bid to Win and becoming an ATO with APMP, that's a good segue into kind of our next round, which is going to focus on a little bit more of APMP. And I think Bhaskar is going to take over and ask you a little bit about your APMP journey.
Yes, thank you, Ashley. Thank you so much for that. David, so when did you become a member of APMP, David?
It would have been 2006. I had previously been an exhibitor at the very first APM UK conference. But like I say, bid management was a skill which was in my portfolio. It wasn't what I viewed as my profession at the time. But later, when the APMP was setting up the approved training part of its certification scheme, they came along to us and said, would you like to become one of our ATOs? The company I was working with then was a project management training company that did a lot of Prince 2 and other sort of certification related training. The APMP scheme, by the way, uses that same platform that certification training for Prince 2 and so on is built on. So that was the model that Tony and Kathy were using when they designed the certification or accreditation scheme as it was originally. So that's when I joined, because to become an approved trainer, you have to be certified at professional level and you have to go through all of it. So I went through foundation and practitioner in the space of, I think, 2 days. And it took me a little longer, about another week or so, before I was sitting in a room with Kathy and Tony, being interviewed for my proposal professional. So a lot of what I put in to the case study then was based on my experiences on that very first bid, and all the lessons that I'd learned and the impact that I'd managed to make from what I've done since. So I like the levels at which the APMP certification scheme is structured. It follows what's called Kirkpatrick levels of things. So with training, you've got 3 levels. Kirkpatrick. 1, did you like it? 2 is, what did you learn? So that is tested. What did you learn is tested by foundation. What are you applying is tested at practitioner, and what impact are you making is tested at the professional level. So they're very useful things which can relate to. HR departments tend to relate to any scheme that's focused around those levels of achievement and impact.
Perfect, David. It's really inspirational, like how many people Tony has brought in as an ATO, because Shipley was the training provider then. And you know what, I'm fast forward in 2017, I think 2019, I think 13 years later after you, Tony told me, Bhaskar, you need to become an ATO because, you know, people are looking online and maybe do something with it, etc. And I'm glad, David, you shared that journey. And it's 2006. My God, you know, that's a long time ago. It feels like 15 years ago, you know, when the whole industry was just coming together in UK and you attended the first conference. I'm just visualizing, and I'm sure listeners will also be visualizing, reflecting how things were. Any memories from the time of 2006 exhibiting at the very first conference, then becoming part of the APMP UK?
I think 2000, it would have been, in fact, it was a very small conference in a farm not far from Amersham, just off to the northwest of London. And I remember meeting at that conference someone who would later become very influential and helpful to me, and that was Howard Nutt. Wow. And Howard Nutt was presenting on the BDCMM. Now, my interest really is we've got to get better at this, and I'd already encountered maturity models in my work with parts of the Philips organization and in other work we were doing. So I really latched on and had lots of interesting discussions with Howard about the CMM and similar approaches that we were taking, because the CMMs provide a pathway where you can plan and measure your progress as an organization in achieving maturity and capability. So I used to meet Howard a lot, and he was very helpful to me. I found him one of the most generous people I ever met, in terms of he was generous with his time and generous with his knowledge. And we've exchanged a lot of good ideas. I remember meeting Howard at that very conference there.
Wow, you're making me emotional. As you know, my very first episode for Scribble Talk was with Howard. And round 3, we dedicated to Howard, called his Nutters round, because Howard has this personality of being the most knowledgeable person, at the same time, most funniest person as well, where he could crack jokes on any serious subjects and at the same time make it much more friendly. But thank you, David. Thanks for sharing that. So 2006 to now, you know, you have trained, inspired, mentored, coached a lot of people. Any interesting training memories comes to your mind?
Yes, one of the most interesting, we always structured this is not certification training, it's our general bid to win workshop. So we always built them around real cases, and we were always able to change the content to be a workshop about the cases that the people brought into the workshop. And I went to work with a small team in California that was selling broadband equipment. It didn't really fit inside the rest of the organization. they felt nobody understood them. They were Americans and they didn't know how to get on with the Finns. So there were two parts I remember. There was a Finnish guy called Tommy who was working with them. And he gave us a little half-hour talk about Finnish business culture and how it fits, which I won't go over now. And then on the afternoon of the first day, they received word from one of their prospects that they were not going to be taken forward. So instead of actually working through writing an executive summary, with the whole of this guy's team, we actually sat through and worked and drafted a letter, which was to the chief executive of the prospect, and said, you know, we understand this and this is the way going, but we feel that you are missing this. So we would like to have the opportunity to present the ideas that we feel we have not considered. I discovered a week after that workshop that it actually got back in and had finally gone on to win the piece of business. So if that was the first time I got direct feedback that these workshops were actually increasing win rates and getting people back in. So I always remember that we actually, we've always worked on real things, but this was a very specific, a letter to the chief executive of a prospect asking to be let back in. And, I don't think we've ever done it so the real text as it went to the customer was done in real time. I do remember that. Yeah, I quite enjoyed that. So I love it when I go back to a customer and I find that they've been doing what I taught them. But to see it in real time was gratifying. So.
Totally, David. That sounds much more memorable. David, for your contributions, you know, a few years down the line, you made fellow.
I'm here.
So that's a great way of doing. So, you know, a successful career, you're given a lot as bid to write for APMP and other things. When was the very first time you attended BidCon in the States? Did you attend BidCon in the States? Or any memories from that experience?
BidCon?
Yeah, the US bid conference.
Yeah, I've presented at a few bid conferences, and when I first went along to, because my first one was in 2006, where I was just attending. I went out there to collect the ATO plaque that was presented to newly created ATOs. And that was in New Orleans, which was the year after Katrina. And Tony was the CEO. So I do remember that quite vividly because the APMP had taken a specific decision that it was definitely going to go to New Orleans to help the city get, you know, it was a decision to go there. And Tony was able to feed back how grateful the locals were that, you know, after the devastation the year before. So that definitely places the year. It would have been 2006. I listened to a lot of the conferences, presentations, and so basically saying, well, what have I got to bring to this? So I didn't feel that I was offering anything novel. And I went to a couple of UK ones. And finally, I latched on to what it was that was an insight, if anything. I don't want to dignify it with anything better, which is that, one, we're all part of a process which is trying to deliver value for money. And the discipline that we're following is project management. Now, the body of knowledge in those days was not as well developed as it is now. It still needs more work. But my belief was, and it still is, that essentially bid managers are project managers. A project is something with a beginning, a middle, and an end, and a business purpose. That pretty much describes what a bid is about. It requires a certain set of skills. My view has been sometimes misinterpreted that I believe all project managers can manage bids. I don't believe that. I just believe that as a profession, we should look to other professions and learn from the skills and knowledge that they've developed. One field, for instance, I believe we could learn an awful lot from the project management people in using Agile in the way we go about bids. So one of the sessions I presented in the UK, I really enjoyed that. I was presenting with a colleague from Outperform, a company I worked with, who had been the technical director at the DSDM consortium, which is an agile methodology. There was no one in the world who knows more than Jennifer about agile methods. And we were able to show how we can apply prioritization to maintain quality, maintain time, and use this to control the work scope in a way that doesn't deliver. One of the metaphors that Jennifer gave me, she picked up a newspaper when we were discussing this conference. She says, look, here's my copy. I think it was the Times. And she says, look, there's nothing missing. Everything is here. There's a crossword on the back page. These are features there. There are no blank spots. There's nothing left out. Every day there's a deadline. They do this day in, day out. And what it is prioritization. So the newspaper industry as a model for agile production was the metaphor we used. And the title of our talk was Drop the Dead Donkey. Leave out the story about the dead donkey, because that's not that's not what our readers want to hear about. We're going to focus on the high value stuff that our readers want to hear about. And that was what a fascinating workshop to hear how some of those techniques can be applied in a proposal context. And I think that should go on. And I'm delighted to see the extent there's an upcoming seminar in the UK, which is using data analytics, which I think my friend Martin Paver presented about a year or so ago to the UK conference, where he's going through this huge plume of data that projects emit, and using techniques like AI and data analytics to identify patterns and come up with predictive measures which will say, how likely is this project to succeed? And it's by working and examining what is going on in the project industry, I think we will learn more about how to manage our projects successfully. And Martin, if you're listening, Martin Smith that is, I'm not saying that we can take any project manager and turn them into a bid manager. That's not what I mean. We just need to learn from our fellow project professionals. So.
David, that was beautiful. Thank you for sharing those. I think you landed some very powerful messages. The number one is, as bid and proposal colleagues, we need to look outside our industry to learn what's happening and lift and drop some of those best practices around. Again, it's important for us to do that, and you nailed the point clearly. Secondly, in a part of the program, it's about not churning bids, it's about churning intelligence behind support as well. And Martin emailed me today regarding bidding quarterly. So, man, it's perfect timing, David. I think Martin has been doing a great job.
I love Martin to pieces, but yes. He sometimes gets my message wrong.
We will pass that. I'm sure Martin is a listener as well, so we will pass that. So we talked a lot about the technical stuff, David. So let's take a little bit step back. And as you rightly pointed about Howard Nutt, we are entering the Nutters round. Before we enter the Nutters round, or what we call it, rapid random fire questions round. So short, sharp answers for questions, whatever that comes in your mind. Let's talk two things before that. Number one is, tell us three things not many people know about you. That could be your hobbies and interests, or that could be a separate thing.
My hobby, in as much as I have any, is singing. And that's manifested itself in a number of ways. Until the pandemic stopped all choir practices meeting, we can't meet because singing is a way to propagate the virus, apparently. I used to be in a local community choir, and we would go around local care homes and entertain people with a range of variety of songs, as well as taking part in concerts from the sponsor organisation, which is our local church. And before that, I was in a company called The Entire Company, which used to recreate essentially musical type entertainments. So for 10 quid, you could turn up on a Friday or a Saturday night and have a fish supper and see a lot of people in costume sing, not quite dance. And it was a form of entertainment, because I love the old music hall, and I like performing. Anyone who's a trainer has to love performing, because you've got to stand up in front of people and risk making yourself look like an arse. So, excuse my French, but and that's been quite rewarding for me, because in times I have appeared as an extra with a spear holder with the Welsh National Opera in the production of Aida. I've been to a choir festival at the Albert Hall, and I've even performed at Wembley Stadium. So that's treating. And what I do now, because having come down south, I had a very strong northern accent, I still have it. At some of these entertainments that we put on, I will recite dialogues, monologues from a writer who was popularised by a performer called Stanley Holloway. So I've even done one of these at an APMP UK conference to fill in while there was a technical difficulty for the speaker behind me. So it was of a failed negotiation called 3 Halfpence a Foot, which negotiates how Sam failed to negotiate the right price for bird's eye maple with Noah, who was building an ark. So these are comic monologues. Well, they're comic if you enjoy that sort of thing. I won't inflict the money now. So.
David, you just made it sound so simple. We could have an entire podcast just on this particular thing that you just said now. But I'm glad that you are doing this, and I'm sure if listeners wants to know more about it, they can get in touch with you. That's brilliant, David. So that's great.
I cannot wait for this to be over so I can meet my friends in the choir again, and we can get back out and start performing. Because we're not allowed in care homes anymore. No one is, not even the relations. So,
got it, David. But I'm glad that this lockdown, you're still continuing to entertain yourself and also engaging people at different levels. That's great, David. Let's enter the nutters round. So, number 1, if you could take 5 things to a deserted island, what would you take with you?
That was a question I didn't prepare for. And I was thinking this might be a lot like Desert Island Discs. Good reading material. What would I like? Probably a book on mathematics.
Oh, interesting.
I was always bad at school, even though so I'd like to bone up on that. History. I failed O-level history. So I would have a history of the stuff I could never pass the question. I became interested in history when I realised that all the people I learned about in science class, Newton and Hooke and so on, they were all contemporaries. And at that point, things sort of clicked for me. I don't have enough experience of being on the desert islands and know what I would need. I certainly hate camping, so anything which would make life more comfortable, like an inflatable mattress.
I will leave you to reflect on this after the podcast, but you have done great things. I think reading material, I think that's good. If you could make a rule, what rule would you set for us to follow?
Don't be an arsehole. I think it's a...
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, let's just, yeah, that's true. Be nice to people. That's good.
One of the things I've come to believe in on experience is people are basically kind. Not only are they kind so when you encounter them socially, the most generous people I ever met in my life were the Geordies and shipyard workers when I used to live in digs in Wallsend-on-Tyne, and they were very, very kind and generous to me. But even in this profession, the people who've helped me most have been people like Tony and people who you would say they're my competitors, but they did more to help me get Bid to Win up and going than anyone else. So if you do want help, just ask. And because people will help you if you ask them, but also be prepared to give it back.
That's very profound advice. And then the point that you mentioned about Tony helping, it's always in my mind. Thank you, David, for that. So what movie or book character are you most similar to?
I'm a great fan of Tolkien and The Lord of the Rings. I will usually bring that book out as we get into the autumn, and I'll read the trilogy through the winter months. So that's bringing us to Peter Jackson.
Nice. What similarity do you have with Peter Jackson?
Nothing. He just makes great movies in a very beautiful country.
Nice. That's great. So
I was privileged to visit New Zealand once where the thing was filmed on location. The only thing I criticised him for was, if anything, the music was too Irish and not enough English, because I know that the Shire is a model of England. Specifically, it's meant to be Warwickshire. But
wow, that's your history and your culture and your performance coming along sound there. So who haven't you seen or talked to in a long time and you hope that they're doing okay?
I think I should reach out to some of my customers to find how they are doing. So there's a young lady who runs the bid operation for a company in southern Germany, which I think I should give her a call. I've been amazed actually how many contacts I've had, because on LinkedIn you put in things like when's your birthday. People I worked with 30 years ago and haven't spoken to have contacted me on WhatsApp and said, is today your birthday? And how are you doing? And then we've had a chat about the strange times. So this certainly has, I often think about my old customers. I'd like to reach out to them. Yeah.
Perfect, David. I think I've given you a trigger point now. I'm sure you will do that in the next week or so. So I'll leave you there. David, have you ever cried at a movie?
No.
No?
I can well up a bit. I'm quite emotional, but I've been too much brought up in the stiff upper lip tradition to let myself do it. So.
Nice. David, you talked about the kindest people and you mentioned Tony and others. So let's talk. Who are the people who haven't you mentioned yet that have been the most influential in your life and career?
Well, some of my old bosses. Just at the time I was leaving Standard Telephones, I had a great boss. His name was also David. And we were looking around for business ideas. And he basically said, it's okay to fail. 9 out of 10 business ideas are going to fail. So, he also said something that I thought was quite profound. He said, making a business profitable is easy. It must be easy because I've done it. You just reduce costs. But growing a business profitably is the hard bit. He didn't give me the answer to that one, but he gave me permission to fail. So you can try things, and if they don't work, you pick up and you go on. So don't be afraid of failing. So if I reproach myself, I've probably been a bit too cautious in my approach to life. So
That's great. That's, and from in your personal life, any inspiration, family, friends?
I think my dad, who's long dead, he was quite a simple person, but he had one thing, which is keeping the family together. And he was straightforward. I mean, he was a humble tradesman, never anything other than a wage payer. But the extent to which he lived by what he believed in, and showed in the way that he looked after me and my older brother, and the way he basically kept that family together through quite a few personally trying situations. I just admired what he did. And I'd like to think, when I look back, have I been as good a father to my kids as he was to me?
Wow, that's very powerful. You know, we are in this COVID environment, David. What have you observed lately that reminded you that people are kind?
I've been impressed by the amount of volunteering that goes on, and these small acts of kindness that one reads about in the newspapers. And so, I mean, obviously Major Tom was a big example, but I'm old enough to have been vaccinated now. But when I went there, the whole place was staffed mainly by volunteers, other than the medical pros. So, yes, people do want to help. They will, if they see the opportunity, do something to help, either whether that's giving to a food bank or volunteering in some way or another. So yes, I think that this situation has brought out that more of our civic society than that we were, in a sense, were losing.
Got it. What's one personal trait you like the most about yourself?
Personal trait I like. I'm gregarious, and I'm willing to. I love to meet new people and bring them in to the circle. I'm like the guy at the door who says, "Welcome, come in. Who do you want to meet?" So some of the most useful things I've done are actually bring someone in, find out what they were good at, and introduce them to someone else. And they will go off and they've done great things together. And I look at that and think, yeah, good. I introduced them. Glad they got on with it. So I do love meeting new people.
Yes, definitely. You sound very friendly, David, and I'm sure listeners will agree to the comment. So you already mentioned few insights about how things need to happen from your experience. So what's the best piece of advice you have received, and from whom? You already mentioned one, but let's see, maybe if there are a few more.
The best piece of advice, other than the one I mentioned, which was giving yourself permission to fail occasionally,
right,
I think is when you do fail, learn from it. I know I'm a process nut, but one of my other wise bosses once said to me, there is always a process. If there's something comes in and something goes out in between, there's a process. The question is it the same process every time? And if you want to be able to repeat a success, you have to capture and define how you do it.
That's a good one. So a long career, starting first proposal in 1986, that's like close to 35 years ago.
My career started in 1970.
Yeah, tell me about it. That's like 35.
That was my first. So yeah, when computers were as big as houses. Yes.
My God, that's like 50 is it? Yeah, my God, yeah, close to 50 years of career, David. beautiful, career, a lot of lovable people in your life, performance, and being the person whom you are. What's next for you? What are you looking forward to in the future?
Well, personally, I'm managing a project which is our downsizing project, so we'll be looking to move. We are doing up a house that we bought on the Severn Estuary. We haven't sold our current house yet, but so I'm managing that part, and I'm looking forward to moving to a beautiful part of the world where there is great food, because I'm a bit of a foodie. And I'm really, really looking forward to restaurants coming back. I go professionally because although most people have retired, I'm still got a professional interest, but I'm hanging out with clever people. So I might start to look a bit clever, which is, we're trying to answer this question: how can we get more value? So this is part of an initiative in the Contracts and Procurement Specific Interest Group. And I'd like maybe to think, what can we as bid professionals do? So I'm the bid expert within a group of project management experts. So I know nothing. I just ask the questions. I'm working with a group of people who know contract law, they know contract models, they know procurement processes inside and out. And I'm just asking this question: how can we keep track of what the project promised? How can we procure this in a way that is related back to the benefits that we promised when we made the business case? And how can we reward our suppliers for adding more value? Now, I don't know the answers. I'm not even sure I'm asking the right questions, but we are grappling with that. And I would hope that, especially as part of this UK initiative, Transforming Public Procurement, that we will find ways of doing business that are maximising the value that we bring, both as project management professionals and as bid professionals. Because I don't think it's enough to win. You have to ask yourself, are we bringing value? What's the value that I'm adding to this and my organisation is adding? And I'm hoping that something will come out of that in the next forthcoming months. We've already started drafting a manifesto for what we will do as project people, and how we'll commit that the decisions we make will not be driven by time, cost, quality stuff, but where's the benefits? It's about the benefits, stupid. So are we still delivering those? This, by the way, was the title of one of my APMP talks. So.
Your listeners will go out, will search you and find all your topics, David. But that's very powerful into a very, very happy episode, David. Thank you so much for sharing all your experience. It's been an absolute privilege to have you with us at Scribble Talk. Wish you, your family, your loved ones, and everybody whom you touch all the good health and happiness. Stay happy, stay healthy, and keep sharing, David. Thank you so much. Thank you.
It's been my pleasure.
To our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. Please visit baachuscribble.com/podcast to listen to this episode and check out any of our other previously recorded episodes. If you've enjoyed today's interview, don't forget to subscribe, review, and share the Scribble Talk podcast. We hope you'll check out our next episode where we interview another industry expert and special guest. Until then, it's Ashley Kays,
Pastor Sundram,
signing off.